The Concord model is the way in which fire departments and individual firefighters can help to reduce the exposure to harmful contaminants that are known to cause health problems in the fire surface. The practices and methods utilized in the Concord model are based on current scientific research and practical experience and other existing models. The prevention of contamination to firefighters does not have to be complicated nor costly. When an alarm comes in, all equipment and gear are clean and ready for use after having been properly decontaminated from previous incidents. All vehicle cabs and interiors should be maintained as clean and relatively free of harmful contaminants and residue from previous firefighting activities. Proper placement of apparatus and equipment on the fire scene is critical in limiting the amount of contaminants that these vehicles are exposed to. All command, safety, and support personnel on site should be equipped with PPE, including adequate respiratory and skin protection in the form of respirator masks and appropriate close-fitting clothing during initial scene size-up and operations. On scene, all windows, doors, and compartments of fire apparatus and support vehicles should be closed to prevent the contamination of interiors and gear stored inside. PPE, such as SCBA and bunker gear, should be worn at all times in close proximity of the fire. All exterior firefighting activities, both offensive and defensive, should be treated with the same caution and seriousness as interior fire attack and rescue. Even personnel who are in limited or temporary contact with the fire scene should wear appropriate respiratory and skin protection. These duties can include such roles as command officers, engineers, and safety officers on the fire ground. It is important to select proper respiratory protection based on the hazards present in the atmosphere. Even if an IDLH atmosphere is not present, it is important to wear filtration masks that will be compatible with the contaminants present. After the fire is out, all personnel involved in fire-up activities such as salvage and overhaul and fire scene investigations should have access to appropriate respiratory protection and protective clothing that will protect them from skin exposure. Following the extinguishment of the fire, performing a comprehensive field decontamination of all gear and protective clothing goes a long way in preventing exposure to harmful contaminants and residue. Simple cleaning supplies such as detergent, brushes, and body wipes kept in a bucket on the apparatus go a long way in ridding firefighters of the largest part of residue and contaminants that they've come in contact with. Also, by having a smaller water hose available with an appropriate adapter, it is possible to safely and quickly clean up without the need of deploying larger hoses or booster lines. By simply placing a protective barrier over the contaminated uniform and skin that was under the turnout gear, it is possible to temporarily contain the contaminants and prevent further cross-contamination of other equipment and personnel. This method of secondary containment can be as simple as an extra set of clothing or coveralls kept on the truck. It is important to have an additional set of footwear available to prevent tracking contaminants around with dirty boots. By bagging and sealing up all contaminated gear and accessories, even after gross field decontamination is performed, it is possible to transport the gear in the clean cab environment of the vehicle, while being prepared for a secondary deployment if necessary on the return trip to the station. All contaminated gear and clothing that is encapsulated can be easily controlled and moved around without contaminating either the station or other work areas. All contaminated tools and hoses should be taken out of service until they can be properly cleaned and decontaminated. Also, the interior of the fire apparatus should be wiped down and sanitized upon return to the station so as to reduce any tertiary contamination. Processing and cleaning of all contaminated clothing and gear should happen in a separate work area away from regular laundry and other activities. The room should also be properly sealed so as to prevent the escape of contaminated air and particulate matter into other parts of the station. All turnout gear, including coats, pants, helmets, gloves, and so forth, should be disassembled and processed in a controlled environment The personnel conducting the processing of contaminated gear should be wearing proper safety equipment to prevent unnecessary exposure to the contaminated gear again. Gloves, boots, hoods, and helmets should also be thoroughly cleaned. It is also important to give attention to things such as helmet liners, sweatbands, and helmet suspension parts during the cleaning process. Proper extractor-style washing machines and drying cabinets should be used if possible to keep the process both quick and gentle. While the contaminated liners and shells are being laundered, a second set of clean gear can be used. In addition to washing gear and equipment, it is also critical to shower and clean yourself as soon as possible after being in a hazardous environment, preferably within an hour. The best thing you can do is to take a cool shower so as to get the contaminants off of your skin without opening the pores and causing additional exposure to the contaminant and residue. All clean gear is returned back to the proper storage areas away from exposure to diesel exhaust and other station contaminants so as to be ready for the next call or alarm. By simply changing our behaviors and using a little bit of planning, it is possible to help reduce or eliminate exposure to most of the known cancer-causing materials without having a major impact on readiness and response.